When the Sopranos series finale aired in 2007, the abrupt cut to black left many viewers wondering if their cable had gone out, until after 10 seconds of a silent black screen, the credits began to roll. Some people think the ending of Made in America is one big cop-out, while others believe it's absolutely brilliant. What matters is we're still talking about it more than a decade later, arguing over whether Tony Soprano was whacked or simply finished his onion rings and went home with his family. So let's make some sense of that final scene and decipher what the ultimate takeaway was in The Sopranos. Before we go on, be sure to hit subscribe and click the bell to get notifications on all of our new videos. Show creator David Chase has insisted there's no definitive answer to whether Tony lives or dies in the series finale. But Chase has also said that, quote, if you look at the final episode really carefully, it's all there. So what evidence does Made in America give us as to Tony's fate? First, there's the man in the members-only jacket. Many people think this is Tony's killer. From his seat at the counter, the man seems to look over at Tony twice. This immediately makes us hyper-aware of his presence and raises our suspicions about his motives. Later in the scene, the man goes to the bathroom. That puts him in a position to get a clear shot at Tony, and it's reminiscent of the scene in The Godfather when Michael Corleone goes into the restaurant bathroom to get the gun hidden behind the toilet. This happens to be Tony's favorite movie scene ever.
Because every time we watch Godfather, when Michael Corleone shoots those guys in the restaurant, those assholes who tried to kill his dad, you sit there with your fucking bowl of ice cream and you say it's your favorite scene of all time.
So it would be dramatic irony if Tony met his end this way. The man's outfit could be a reference to Eugene Pontecorvo, who also wears a members-only jacket in the first episode of season 6, which is titled Members Only.
Look at this guy. Members only? How long you been wearing that?
In this episode, Eugene shoots someone in a fast food restaurant on Christopher's orders, so the implication is that something similar could happen to Tony here. The other thing is that Tony ruins Eugene's life by refusing to let him retire to Florida like he wants to.
Your Florida thing. Tony asked me to speak to you. That's a no-go.
So Eugene eventually kills himself. In other words, the man in the members-only jacket automatically reminds us of how badly Tony treated Eugene, and more generally, how many terrible things Tony's done to all kinds of people, which could come back to bite him. Finally, the members-only episode ends with Tony being shot by his uncle Junior, so it could be fitting for the series finale to also end with Tony being shot. In the finale scene, there's a close-up on Tony's face as he stands at the entrance of the diner. Then the camera cuts to him in a booth in a way that makes it seem like he's imagining himself there before he sits down, or like we've fast-forwarded in time without seeing Tony move. It feels a little disorienting and surreal. Chase was actually trying to recreate the ambiguous feeling of 2001: A Space Odyssey in this finale, and he said that this shot is a reference to the ending of 2001, when Bowman sees an older, aging version of himself sitting down to eat. In 2001, the shot makes us reflect on the future of humanity. Here, it makes us think about the future of Tony. Could there be a more evolved, new version of Tony Soprano in some future time? The moment also sets up the use of point-of-view shots in the scene. We get a POV shot each time the bell at the diner entrance rings. We see Tony's face look up at the door, and then we see his perspective as someone enters the diner. This happens 4 times. The 5th time, we only hear the bell as Meadow enters and see Tony looking up. Then it cuts to black. So based on the previous point-of-view shots, the implication is that we're seeing what Tony is seeing, and that's black nothingness, which suggests he's dead. Something about the pacing here makes us picture Meadow arriving just in time to see her father get shot, Tony dying just before he gets to see her walk through that door. The full screen of black is also the opposite of the visual we get when Tony wakes up from his coma earlier in season 6. There, the screen goes completely white, symbolizing light and life. The sudden silence that cuts off the Journey song is another clue. It's in line with something Bobby Bacala says earlier in the season about what he imagines it's like to be assassinated.
You probably don't even hear it when it happens, right?
Tony flashes back to this moment in the episode before Made in America.
You probably don't even hear it when it happens, right?
So that puts even more emphasis on it. The silence also reminds us of Silvio's experience when Jerry is shot across the table from him. In this moment, the sound lowers, and Silvio doesn't even seem to hear the gunshot or understand what's happened until he sees Jerry's blood sprayed all over him. So this idea of not hearing it when it happens seems really significant when we look at the final moment of the series. Made in America is also full of death symbolism. The episode opens with a shot of Tony from above as he lies sleeping, so it looks like he's in a casket. He's woken up by organ music that sounds like it would be played at a funeral. A few minutes in, we see him peeling an orange, which could be a reference to The Godfather using oranges as a bad omen. Later in the episode, there's a spooky orange cat who's staring at a photo of Christopher, whom Tony killed a few episodes before. And in the diner scene, there's an image of a tiger on the wall behind Tony that reminds us of that cat. So all of this haunting imagery represents that Tony can never escape the many murders he's committed and the death that will come for him sooner or later. Then there's the context of what's happening in the plot. We have to consider how likely it would be that Tony would be assassinated at this point in time. The second to last episode of the series is a bloodbath, as Tony's crew basically goes to war with the Lupertazzi family. Ultimately, the conflict is resolved when the Lupertazzis turn on their boss Phil, meet with Tony and his crew, and all but give permission for the Soprano crew to take Phil out.
Well, you do what you gotta do.
So it would seem that Tony's out of the woods. But it's also possible that the Lupertazzi family got Tony's guard down so they could eliminate him as well, especially now that he's been weakened by losing some of his men. If Tony does die without us seeing it happen, this is in keeping with how The Sopranos defies the form of the traditional mafia story on screen. In one of those classic mob movies, the hit would be a surprise, but then we'd get the satisfaction of seeing what's happening from the outside, understanding the plot against the character.
You fingered Sonny for the Barzini people. Ah, that little farce you played with my sister. You think that could fool a Corleone?
But since the show is putting us in Tony's head, we experience it as he would. If Tony were taken out, he'd have to not know it's coming. He'd never understand the why or the who or the how. His life would just be over without warning. So based on Chase's statement that it's all there in this episode, the evidence does make it seem like Tony was killed in the final scene. But it's not certain. And Chase has repeatedly refused to confirm that Tony dies at this moment. So this very intentional ambiguity is an artistic choice to force the viewer to decide for themselves. Even if Tony isn't killed and Made in America, it's pretty clear that ultimately things won't end well for him, and he knows it.
There's two endings for a guy like me. High-profile guy. Dead or in a can. My estimate historically, 80% of the time it ends up in a can like Johnny Shack. Or on the embalming table of Cozzarelli's.
All through the series, we see the tragedy that strikes people connected to the mob. Characters go to prison, become informants, despair over how the mafia has wrecked their dreams, or get killed by people they thought were friends. We know that even if Tony isn't whacked, he's likely going to be indicted.
80 to 90% chance you'll be indicted. That gun charge. I get sick when I think of it. Plus interstate fraud. And if Carlos starts talking homicide...
The FBI team trying to build a case against him are really racing against time, trying to put Tony behind bars before he gets himself killed. So either way, Tony won't escape the inevitable end of mob life. Regardless of what happens after the cut to black, Tony will live his remaining moments on Earth in the shadow of dread. He seems relatively relaxed in the diner scene, but we as viewers are holding our breath, even though there's no concrete reason to feel afraid. It's sort of amazing how Chase gets us so invested in Meadows' attempts at parallel parking. This is such a memorable aspect of the scene, and it's a perfect example of the mundane tension we feel throughout The Sopranos. On one level, drawing out Meadows' parking is Chase's way of playing with us. He knew millions of people would be watching the finale, waiting for something big and terrible to happen. And as we watch, we find ourselves worried that each member of the family is in danger until they arrive at the diner. So part of our anxiety is that we want to see them all together one last time. and we never get to. Meanwhile, the tension we feel is also a testament to how successful the show has been in putting us in Tony's shoes.
You eat and you play and you pretend like there's not a giant piano hanging by a rope just over the top of your head every minute of every day.
That worry we feel on his behalf is what he lives with every day.
When you're Tony Soprano, even going out for ice cream with your family is fraught with looking over your shoulder. This is his own personal hell that he lives with, and who knows, it could have been then or maybe not.
There's another theory that the cutting to black doesn't represent Tony's death, but the viewer's. The moment cuts us off from the protagonist we've spent so much time with and just leaves us hanging.
But I think what David was saying on the one hand is there's no more TV. TV's over. Goodbye.
Chase has said that many viewers went from getting a catharsis from Tony's bad behavior to having a perverse desire to see him brutally murdered. In his words, they wanted to see his brain splattered on the wall. I thought that was disgusting, frankly. So part of the rationale for the ending was to deny us that feeling of being somehow better than Tony, even though we've been identifying with him all this time, not letting us derive some twisted satisfaction from seeing his end. The final scene includes the viewer in an experience of death to remind us that this final, mysterious moment is the same for everyone. Tony's Uncle Jr. is the outlier, the exception to the rule that mob life has to end in jail or early death. Jr. actually lives long enough to waste away in an old folks' home. But we see this exchange in the series finale.
You're my dad. You two ran North Jersey.
We did?
Yeah.
Well, that's nice.
So even if you somehow make it out of the mafia alive, no one escapes aging and death. As Chase has said, whether this is the end here or not, it's going to come at some point for the rest of us. So what's the meaning of the episode title, Made in America? Well, many classic mob stories are really commentaries on the American dream.
America has made my fortune, and I raised my daughter in the American fashion.
And The Sopranos adds its own layer of commentary to that American dream question. Tony fits the image of that good all-American dad who mans the grill at backyard get-togethers. He's provided his family with all possible material comforts.
Spent $5,000 on a set of drums, SAT tutor, coffee maker.
But he's done that through being a cold-blooded murderer. So the version of the American dream he's achieved is familiar and normal on the surface, but dark and corrupted at the center. AJ gets at this truth early in the series finale when he's upset over what he sees as the false promise of America.
I mean, this is still where people come to make it. It's a beautiful idea. And then what do they get? Bling? Come-ons for shit they don't need and can't afford?
Chase has explained that he went with the episode title, quote, not only because Tony's a made guy and all these guys are made guys, but also because it was about the extreme amount of comfort Americans have, especially people with money. He was thinking of how the war with Iraq was in fact made in America, and how in the episode Tony and Carmela are able to stop AJ from signing up for the military like he wants to, simply because they have money.
We don't feel joining the army is in your best interest.
So in some ways, the episode is an indictment of America's materialism and the darkness we're willing to turn a blind eye to in order to preserve our comfortable way of life. The diner scene also mirrors the ending of the season 1 finale, when Tony and his family have dinner together at Artie's restaurant. This was a genuinely warm, happy evening that inspired Tony to raise a toast.
Someday soon, you're gonna have families of your own. And if you're lucky, you remember the little moments. Like this. That were good.
But when AJ references this moment in Made in America, Tony can't remember it.
Focus on the good times.
Don't be sarcastic.
Isn't that what you said one time? Try and remember the times that were good?
I did?
So the contrast between the two scenes is really striking. It shows how far Tony's declined spiritually over the course of the series. And while the first scene presumably ended with the Soprano family heading home together, this one may well have ended with Tony shot to death in front of his wife and kids. Still, the song that Tony chooses at the jukebox is very significant. Don't Stop Believin' transforms these mundane moments between him and his family into a subtly uplifting and affirmative portrait. The hopeful song imparts the idea that, in the end, this everyday, nondescript, even boring family time might be what matters the most. So even in its final moments, the show veers away from the traditional mafia story, which presents a romanticized, glamorous view of family. By setting the final scene in a classic diner, playing an all-American song, and making The Sopranos look like a very regular American family, the show does end up affirming the value of family. Chase has said that for him, the song really holds the ultimate message of the finale. He says, quote, "There are attachments we make in life, even though it's all going to come to an end, that are worth so much. And we're so lucky to have been able to experience them. Life is short. Either it ends here for Tony or some other time. But in spite of that, it's really worth it. So don't stop believing." In a sense, what Chase is saying is almost an extension of Tony's remember the good times philosophy, even if Tony has forgotten his own wisdom. So while the ending of The Sopranos seems far from optimistic, the whole point is to make us value life more by showing us how quickly it can be ripped away. If you're always in danger like Tony is, all you can ever do is cherish the good moments before they're gone.
In the midst of debt, we are in life, eh? Or is it the other way around?
It's Deborah.
And Susanna, and you're watching Screen Prism.
Thank you guys so much for watching.
If you like this video, please subscribe for more insights about all of your favorite movies and shows.
Down here.